Hello, it's Tuppence, and this week is a Midsummer fantasy collaboration that is hosted by Mini Scenes GB. Thank you very much, Tracey. I've got a flower mould here. It's a flower coaster mould, and I'm just giving it a clean with some masking tape. I want to get rid of any dust or leftover mica or resin bits from a previous make, so that looks pretty clean to me. I'm not going to be using this as a coaster. It's going to be turned into something a little unusual, but I'm going to start by dusting it with this rose pink Arteza mica. I'm going to cover the whole of the surface. I'm using a soft makeup brush and I'm applying it all to the bottom and a little bit up the sides, although I'm not actually going to fill this mould. I'm not going to fill it to its full depth with resin because I want a fairly shallow coaster. Right, I'm rounding up all the excess, sweeping it up into one point, and then I can tip this back into my pot because I'm not going to waste anything. So I've got a baby wipe. I'm using that to remove the mica powder that's on the relief in the middle of this mould because I want to add another colour. Once I've taken all of this off, I'm going to let that dry for a few seconds. Now I can use this light gold from Arteza, and I'm going to put it in the middle. I'm just going to clean my brush off on the back of my hand. Your gloves really do take off the mica nicely. So this gold will now only stick where I've cleaned the mould. Anything that goes on the pink is not going to show up because the pink will be on the surface. I can happily colour this and not worry about it. But any dust that I have in here afterwards, I'm not going to put back in my pot because it will be mixed with some of the pink mica. I've mixed up 2 ounces of craft resin. It's a 1:1 resin that is low viscosity, and I'm going to add some white pigment paste to this. Now I've already used this multiple times today, so it's mixed up. I'm going to add that to my resin and mix it in thoroughly. This is Supreme White and it comes from Apex Resins, as they are now known. And I'm going to mix that really well and make sure that that is all incorporated. I don't want any lumps of the raw pigment floating down to the bottom of my mould. I'm ready to pour this now, and I've got 2 ounces here, as I've said, but I may not need all of that. I don't want this to be thick because I do need to shape this coaster. Well, I'm going to shape it like a bowl, but that's not what it's going to be used for. I've put a small amount into the middle where all those little dots are. So these raised areas are a nightmare because they trap bubbles. So I'm just going to tap this with my silicone tool because I don't want to dislodge any of the mica, but I do want to maybe just get rid of any bubbles. It's also why I like craft resin, but it's why I'm using a low viscosity one over a resin that might cure a little quicker. So I've added a little bit more, and again I'm just using the brush to drag along in between all of these little fingers, fronds, I don't know what you'd call them, but the lines that are sticking up, just to make sure that the bubbles that could be there are removed. I'm adding some more resin and I'm going to fill this to about half its depth. That's going to make it much easier for me to shape later. So I didn't do a bad guess. I do have a little bit of resin left and I'll put that into something else. I'm taking the silicone brush around the edges, again trying to prevent any bubbles. And to help that, I'm going to give it a quick spritz of isopropyl alcohol. Now I need to leave this to set. I'll be back to check on this in about 6 to 8 hours. And 8 hours later, it is very, very soft still, but I am able to handle it. I'm keeping my gloves on because this is not fully cured. I can take it out of the mould and I'm trying to be really careful because I don't want to stretch it. I do want to keep its shape. So I'll take it out really carefully, especially around those little ridges. They're catching on it. Almost there. There we go. And you can see how soft and bendy that is. I have a bowl that I've put a plastic bag, or put in a plastic bag. And I'm going to put this in, and yes, it looks like I'm doing it back to front. If you were going to make this into a bowl, you would want the coloured side facing up, but it's not going to be a bowl. So this is a finial, and it's pretty heavy, and I was hoping it was going to be heavy enough to weight this down, but it really wasn't. I'm going to use my heat gun to warm this up and make this even softer. So I'm doing it on both sides, and I'll put it back in the bowl. And I grabbed a bottle of resin that was almost full, and this was large enough and heavy enough that it would hold this down. So I just had to make sure that it was balanced correctly. And once I did, I left this now overnight. Next morning, and I can take this out. I don't need my gloves anymore because this is now fully cured. And you can see it's holding its shape. I don't have any marks, which is great. And here we go. Yep, that is the shape that I wanted. And I can now reveal that I'm going to turn this into a skirt for a fairy. I need to drill a hole in the center, and then it will be a skirt that will hopefully wobble. Okay, so I have my skirt, and I'm going to use this. It's a ball from a rollerball deodorant. So I took the ball out, cleaned it, and that's going to be the head for my fairy. I also need to make a body, so I'm going to be using some polymer clay. I'm using this Sculpey Ultralight. Not my favourite, but I do have a lot of it, so I'm going to try and use it up. And I need to make an armature. This is some foil that I have screwed up into a kind of teardrop shape, and this is going to be the skeleton of my fairy's body. I'm going to wrap it in a piece of foil to try and smooth out some of these bumps, because any of the bumps that are there will show through this Sculpey. It's super soft. Okay, that's not bad. I've got a teardrop shape which looks a little bit like her body. So now I need to cover it. I'm going to roll out some Sculpey between two popsicle sticks to help me get a fairly even depth. And then I can wrap this foil piece in the Sculpey. I'll cut off any of the excess. I don't want it too thick. The thicker it is, the longer it's going to take to bake. So I'll trim off any excess and then fold the pieces together and blend it so that it all sticks and I get rid of any seams. I'll try and make this as smooth as possible. I'm using my fingers and a silicone tool to blend out any of the shapes, and you can see what I mean, that you really can see any lumps and bumps that might be under there. Okay, that's not too bad. Just try and polish off any of the finger marks. That doesn't look too bad. Let's try it for size. So this is going to be the skirt, that will be the body, and I think that looks pretty proportionate. Alright, so now I need to make some arms. I'm going to start with one long strip and I will roll it slightly into a snake. Then I can cut this in half, and that will give me roughly the same length to work with. I'm going to squeeze the bottom part slightly so that it's smaller, and that will be the hand. And then I'll attach it to the side of the body and curve it round. I can round the top piece, and that will be the shoulder. It'll also help it to stick to the body. Once I'm happy with the shape, I can move on and do the same to the next one. I'm not going to give her any hands or individual fingers. I'm just rolling the bottom to make it slightly pointed. I'll check that this is the same size, and then I can attach it to the other side and curve it round in front of her body. Again, the same process, pushing the top round and making sure that it is attached to the body. I'm just going to make some marks where the elbows will crease using another silicone tool. I'll do that on both sides, and that's the arms done. Now I want to define the neck, because at the moment it's just one big blob, and I want to make it look like she's wearing a dress. So again, I'm going to roll another little snake and I'll flatten it a little bit. Then I can take another silicone tool. I'm using the brush shape, and I'm going to press that into the bottom of the strip, and it will create a frill. I can put this around the neck and it will make it look like she's wearing a dress, even though it's all one piece. So I'll try it on for size. It doesn't have to go all the way to the back because I'm going to be putting some wings on her. That's about right, but I can't blend this in, so I need to attach that with a little bit of glue. And I've got some liquid Sculpey, which is a liquid polymer clay. I'm going to put that on the back of the strip and this will bake hard once this is all in the oven. Lay it back in place, and that will help to glue it on without me having to blend the shape out. I'm going to make some legs now, and I'm making them in a very similar way that I did the arms. So I'll make two sort of sausages or snakes, roll them out, getting thinner slightly to the bottom. I'll just curve them slightly at the bottom to give the indication of some feet. I'm going to repeat the same process, and I'll lay it next to the other one to make sure that I get them both the same size. I can trim anything off. This one's looking a little bit more chunky than the other, so I'm just going to smooth that out a little bit more. Curve the foot, and again check for size. That needs a little bit more cut off. Now I can round the top pieces. I'm going to set in the little hooks that I need. I want these legs to dangle under the skirt. So I've got some little hook eyes. I'll just screw that into the top while the clay is still soft. I'm going to add a little bit of the liquid Sculpey. That will help to drip down in there. I've managed to block the hole, so I'm just going to unblock that with my silicone brush, and then that will go in the oven and it will be able to set solid. And I'm going to bake these now in an air fryer. I use solely for craft purposes. They're going in at 130 for 30 minutes. I love using the polymer clay because of its immediacy. As I say, 30 minutes later it's set, it's hard, you're ready to paint it once it's cooled down. I can't do that with this head because it is a plastic ball, so I am using some air dry foam clay. It's pretty similar in consistency to the Sculpey, just a little bit softer. It is, however, going to take a few days to dry. So I'm putting it on the roller ball and shaping a kind of cap over about half of the head. This is going to be the hair. Once this is in place and dried, it will stick naturally onto the ball. I don't need to add any glue or anything else. I'll mark a line for a parting and try and smooth out the surface as best I can with my fingers. This stuff doesn't really sand very well, so the smoother you get it now, the better. I'm going to prop it in a mould so that it doesn't get marked while I work on the other bit. I'm going to make a top knot or a bun, so I'll roll that into a ball and attach it. This stuff sticks really well to itself. I'll poke a hole in the centre with my silicone tool and then set this on my windowsill to dry in the sun. Once it's dry, I'm using a pokey tool to put a hole in the top, and I'm applying a little bit of super glue so that I can fit in one of the hooks. I'm also going to fit one exactly polar opposite to that, the other halfway round, so that will be where the neck is. And it was much easier to heat up the pokey tool and make a hole. Then I could screw in that other eye hook. I've got some chalk paint which I'm going to use for flesh. This is called Jasmine and it comes out as a really lovely peachy flesh colour. I'm going to use that to paint the ball, the legs, and the shoulders and the arms. And because it is chalk paint, it bonds really well. I didn't need to use any kind of a primer, but I will need to varnish this afterwards because it's going to be a matte surface. The gold didn't come out quite as well as I liked in these indents, so I've got these rhinestones that are self-adhesive. They come on a ribbon and I've cut a small strip off. I'm going to use those to set into the channels and brighten this up. So I'm peeling off the backing. I'm going to lay these into the channel, and the glue on this is extremely strong and durable, so even if I wanted to put this outside, it would be absolutely fine. They fit perfectly in the channel. I'm going to go around and fill in all the rest, and I've already put a hole in the top of this using a hand drill. Now for the painting, I'm using some brown acrylic paint. I'm going to paint this a solid colour, and then I can add some more details to it later on with some dry brushing. So I'm going to paint over this whole area. I haven't had to prime it or anything. The acrylic paint sticks to it perfectly well, and I will seal this in with some acrylic varnish once I've finished all of the painting and it's completely dry. Now I want to paint the top to match the skirt, and I don't have a paint for that, so I'm going to use the same mica powder that I used. I'm using some acrylic varnish to mix up my own paint. I'll mix in some of the mica powder, and then I can paint the top. It is a little bit more transparent, so I may have to give this a couple of coats. But the good thing about this is that I am varnishing this at the same time. Now my fairy needs a nice pair of shoes to match, so I've mixed some more mica powder in, and I'm painting a V on the front of the foot. You can see the colour is much stronger, so I should only need to have one coat of paint here. I'll carry that around the back, and voila, she's got a pair of shoes, or at least one. I'm using some gold paint and a dry brush, and I'm trying to make this as streaky as possible. She's got some golden highlights in her hair. This is going to be one well turned out fairy. I'll paint a couple of crescents for the eyes. And she's going to have lips the same colour as her dress and her shoes. I told you she was well turned out. I'm going to give her some blush by using the same colour mica powder and apply it with a makeup brush. Once I seal this in with the varnish, it'll be fine. I drew some fairy wings on my computer and have printed them out. And I've just got a scrap of acetate, which I'm going to tape down over the surface. I'm using some masking tape just to hold that still. And I'm going to use some UV resin to make the wings. And I thought I could use this rhinestone tape to make the outline. So basically I will be creating a rhinestone bezel, and then I can infill with the Let's Resin UV resin. I'm going to speed this up and you can see what I mean. The glue is a kind of gel and it's easily cut with just ordinary scissors. So I'm cutting it into individual rhinestone strips and then following the outline, sticking it down on top of the acetate. The strips are pretty flexible, so I can shape them around the corners and the bends, but I do need to make sure that I butt them up and that there are no gaps between the bits that are joined, especially around the outside. I'm adding some peacock blue alcohol ink to one of the UV resin pots, and the other one I will put some holographic dazzling diamonds glitter in. Then I can fill the spaces, half with the glitter and half with the blue, and I'll mix them together. I didn't think the blue was strong enough, so I added a very small amount more. That's better, and I cured as I went along. Once the whole wing was done, I put it under my lamp for 5 minutes. Then I used the glitter UV resin to give it another layer and cured that. Next I peeled it off the acetate, and it was a little tricky because all of those rhinestones have a glue on the back, which means that I need to give it a coat of UV resin. This will give it added strength and it will eliminate all that sticky glue that is on the back of the rhinestones. I already took the clay pieces outside and varnished them, and now they're ready to be joined with jump rings. So I just need to make sure that the front of the head is facing the front of the body, and I can join up the two little hooks using a jump ring. And this was incredibly fiddly. I needed several pairs of hands, and it was really difficult for me to show you without getting my fat fingers in the way, so bear with me. It is just the same as joining any other jump ring. You just need to make sure that you twist the two pieces of the jump ring away from each other rather than pull them apart, and equally twist them back together again to make sure that it stays nice and strong. But there you go, she's now got a head and a body. In order to join the skirt and the legs, I've got a looped head pin, and I've put loops on the straight end, and then I've folded it in half, and I've kind of made it into a Y, an upside down Y. So I want to poke this end, the bottom end of the Y, up through the hole. So now I've got the top, or the leg of the Y if you like, through the top of the skirt. I'll put a jump ring through that, and then I can attach that to the body. So now she has a skirt. And lastly, I need to attach the legs, and I will attach each one to a different arm of the Y. This way they will dangle next to each other. I've got some pretty roses that are nail decorations, and I got these from Temu. I'm going to put some of these in her hair in an attempt to disguise where the hook is. I want to put one at her waist as well, and this will make the gap between her body and her skirt seem not quite so big. And lastly, I need to attach her wings. I'm using some of the UV bonding resin from Let's Resin. I'm going to put a little bit on her back, and then I will hold the wing in place and cure it using the little torch that comes with a kit. I'm going to attach the other one in exactly the same way, and then after I've temporarily cured these using the torch, I'm going to put them under the lamp and perhaps reinforce them from the sides with the UV resin as well. I hung her for my bird feeder in the garden, and every time the wind blew she kept turning around, and the way her head is angled makes her look like she's coyly watching you as she goes, like she's peeking over her shoulder. I think she's really adorable and she deserves a name, so if you'd like to leave your suggestions please in the comment box below, then I will let you know on the community post which name I pick. Please check out my description box below for the playlist link to see what everybody else has created for this midsummer fantasy. And if you've liked this video, please give me a thumbs up, comment, share and subscribe if you haven't. It's free. You'll be able to come back and see what I'm going to make next time, and you really help my channel. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.